Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is Phil Stern, the operating principal of Mainsail Partners. Mainsail is a growth equity investor who invests in B2B SaaS companies in vertical software industries. Their operations value creation team, part of the people that show up to help founders and their teams when a growth equity investor invests in a company. And he specializes in go-to-market, sales, marketing, and the rest. So we're really digging deep on the go-to-market practice after you've got it up with a founder and a couple of salespeople and a little bit of marketing towards 5 million ARR. What happens next? He's working with tons of companies and their portfolio, and he's the chief expert consultant therapist in that scalable go-to-market journey. There's a lot of great insights. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, Phil. Good to see you. Nice to meet you.
Likewise, Greg. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Well, I've connected with multiple people on the Mainsail team, and when I asked for the sales expert to talk to, your name came up, and we're finally getting connected here. So it's nice to meet you. I can't wait to ask all the questions that I hear almost every day from the founders that I work with about the B2B SaaS growing and scaling sales game, the changing
My
environment.
favorite topic, Greg.
I know, we
Can't
love
wait.
this stuff, and it's a Friday here, I'm in Dallas, and it's dark with storms, and you're in Denver, it looks like it's a little cooler up there, yeah?
It's a beautiful sunny day. We had our storms last night, so
Okay.
everything is perfect today.
I'm a skier, are you a skier too, Phil?
I am. Anything
Okay.
we can do to be outdoors, we're going to do it in our household.
Excellent, very nice. Well, let's dig right in here. I've had, multiple senior folks and, principals for growth equity investors on the program explaining what the game is. You're on the operating side, so that means the bigger growth equity funds and teams have operating or value creation teams. They say, we have people to help you with pricing and go to market and technology and operations and all that good stuff. Growth equity comes up with help. So before we dig into that, why don't you just explain what Mainsail is? I've had two Mainsail funded founders on the podcast here already. Tell us about Mainsail as a growth equity fund.
Yeah, so as you know, we're a growth equity fund. We are based in Austin, Texas, and San Francisco. I'm, of course, in Denver. We have a sizable remote team as well, and we partner exclusively with bootstrap founders of vertical B2B software businesses. And
Thank you for saying a clear focus. Usually funds are like, it's big, small, if they look really good and we're feeling that good today, but B2B SaaS, vertical, bootstrapped. Thank you. Clear.
ideal customer profile will come up in our
I
conversation
get
today,
it.
Greg, and we
I
at
know.
Mainsail have one as well.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Tell me more about Mainsail here. What kind of companies do you invest in?
Yeah, so we love to find the operators in these vertical markets. They can be niche, they can be as small as commercial laundry, and all the way up through heavy duty truck repair, roofing, etc. And they've built really great products, and they're sort of getting pulled into their markets.
Mm.
You can sort of see the product market fit in that they are growing, usually growing really rapidly with very little go-to-market infrastructure.
Mhm.
And so we're looking for these gems. They're out there. People have spent tremendous amounts of time and resources on their own building these amazing businesses, and that's who we're looking to partner with because we really believe in these vertical line markets and the very specific workflows that are required in some of these to be the core ERP in some of these vertical markets.
It's not a surprise, but verticals are awesome. Right? No, I mean,
I
like deep knowledge and sticky solutions and founders who speak the language, and you can go to a trade show and everybody's there, CAC and LTV,
Absolutely.
this magic. It doesn't fit the VC funded, Silicon Valley style VC funded playbook, but just briefly, how does growth equity work in this kind of equation? They get to a certain amount of revenues, bootstrapped or without a lot of outside funding. When does
And
Mainsail show up?
yeah, that's exactly what, we're going to partner, say 3, 4, 5 million of ARR,
Okay,
up,
that's pretty early.
up to 10, but pretty
Okay,
early.
yeah.
And again, what we're looking for is clear evidence that there's a product market fit, and there's a market there. And you see that in NPS scores. You see that again in just the growth of the business. You see that in the retention, profile of these businesses. And we come in to provide not only capital, balance sheet capital, but also provide advisory and partnership, and just sort of, we're going to bring board members with great experience, domain and scale experience to the table. We're going to bring operators, former operators like myself, and the rest of the operations team to the table, just to come and help.
Yeah.
And it's really our this partnership ethos, which I'm guessing by the way, every growth equity firm would say to you. I don't think
Well, not
that's
everybody's big enough to have a
right,
team of experts like yourself,
right.
and you have a wider team across the whole functional spectrum there, but, everybody does it a little different way, so we'll hear about how you guys do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for us, we have, roughly a portfolio of 24, 25 companies, and we actually have more than 25 people on the operations team. And we're really proud of that ratio. And actually, I think that is what is unique about
Yeah.
Mainsail. You mentioned functional expertise. We essentially have a person leading each function that you're going to see in a software business. So, engineering, sales, marketing, customer experience, et cetera. We have a person who's a former operator, and sometimes, like myself, a former Mainsail portfolio
Mhm,
company
mhm.
operator, serving in that function. And then we have a number of other folks on the team who specialize in market research and strategy and pricing and all these really important things that our founders, find really valuable, and can come in and help them at critical moments in the growth of their business.
So unlike a VC investor, who generally doesn't hover around these really kind of sticky, maybe slow-moving verticals that pick up steam, but unlike that, growth equity like, Mainsail, you come in and, you help, with a little funding to grow faster, but not crazy fast. It's not rocket fuel. It's practical and all of
Yep.
that. And there's more founder money off the table, the secondary, not the primary, little
Right.
funding to grow. Growth equity shows up with a little de-risking for founders. That's pretty common, I presume, in the Mainsail portfolio.
Absolutely. I think it's part of what motivates some of these founders. They have, nearly all of their net worth in a lot of cases tied into their business. And it's an opportunity to de-risk that, recognize some liquidity for all of their hard work, continue to roll forward. I mean, nothing makes us happier than a founder having a substantial
Yes.
position going forward. I mean, that's what we want. We want to be really equal partners with these founders. And then we can then help us all grow this
Yeah.
business, from 3, 4, 5 million to 30, 40, 50 million, before we have another exit.
Right. So that's more, I call growth equity practical funding. It's aligned, the founder and the growth equity investor, founders, got to have the same goal. It isn't crazy. It's a new phase of growth. Getting from 10 to 30 or 50 is a different sport than getting to 10 in the first place. So you need a lot of help. But what percentage of those 27 portfolio companies, and presumably some that have made it through that already, are minority versus majority?
Yeah,
Minority is polite. They let you in and get you to
right.
participate, but you're not, the majority owner telling them what to do.
Percentage-wise, I don't know if I can do the
Yeah.
math off the top of my head, but
Okay.
it's the vast majority of our partnerships are
There we go.
majority in investments. And so,
Yeah.
it would be the exception, not the rule for us.
Okay. Well, it is, when founders I know that are bootstrapping and they get a call from Mainsail, you guys are very active. And,
Terrific.
please come to our conference and meet
Right,
the
right.
other founders. I know you guys just did that. I heard about it, and
Just this week, I
just
got home last night from
oh
it,
my
yeah.
gosh, in Phoenix, right?
In Scottsdale, yeah.
Okay, my old
Yeah.
home turf there. But they hear, well, I don't know, I'm going to keep running this. And then they
Mhm.
hear about taking some money off the table. People like you show up and say, we could help you here. These darn bootstrappers been carry this other backs, haven't been overpaying for senior leadership who's done it
Mhm.
before and consultants and so forth.
Right,
Maybe a little cash starved, time starved, all that kind of thing. It's
right.
kind of a relief to a lot of founders to imagine people are going to help and take a little money off the table, something like that.
I sense that there's a relief. I sense that there's also renewed excitement and energy
Mm.
for them. And a point you just made was that, they don't necessarily have a lot of executive level leadership around them. And I
Yeah.
think they really value that moment. In fact, of course, I've listened to Brian Forrester and Paul Van
Oh, sure.
Meter's
Yeah.
episodes, of course.
On the
And
podcast here,
both
right,
and
yeah.
yes, on the podcast, and both of them mention that.
Mhm.
Brian mentions his CRO who's been pivotal
Yeah.
executive team member for him since day one. And Paul talked about his VP of sales.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, I think that sort of renews the excitement because they realize all these things they had to do. I mean, you're doing 10 jobs, including the
Yeah.
janitor, right? And
Yeah.
so you're saying, oh my gosh, now I get to focus on the strategy, or now I get to focus on whatever retention, whereas I was doing the full go-to-market stack. And I think the founders get really excited, a lot of renewed energy.
Or I've tried three VPs of sales and we couldn't figure out how to do it right. I hired the wrong person. I didn't set it up right. We did it too early, did
Yes,
it too late, all that kind of thing. You help set the foundation and hire the right person and increase the odds of success with all of that, I'm
correct.
sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of our first areas we're going to focus is getting just a great team built. And we have an amazing talent team at Mainsail, an internal recruiting and talent development organization.
Okay.
And that's who people like me partner with to find the right and help the
Yeah.
founder find the right sales leader.
If you were not part of Mainsail, you might be like a fractional CRO or a CRO consultant, right?
Right, right. I was about to say, no, Greg, if I wasn't at Mainsail, I'd be running a
Oh, we'd be back.
go-to-market org
Yeah.
the rest of my life. Are you
Yeah.
kidding? But no, you're right. It's the equivalent of going outside and hiring a fractional resource, a consulting group. Maybe you're outsourcing, part of your go-to-market function. And I think that's great. I think if you have people in your network who are strongly referred, that can be a fine measure. I think for us, we're going to partner through the entire journey with you, and it's going to be one team of people, very consistent.
Yeah.
But the even better part is we're gonna bring all of the data and ideas and best practices, and by the way, mistakes made, lessons learned
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
from our
Yeah.
portfolio of like businesses, non-competitive like businesses to the
Mhm.
table for you. And I think that's one of the biggest differences is we just get so many more at bats
Yeah.
than a lot of other people get.
Well, I can't wait to pick your brain here. So, just to be clear, you're not kind of jumping over the table and saying, "I'll run it for you temporarily, fractionally." You are
No,
consulting, advising,
yeah.
therapy, data, frameworks,
Yep.
learning, cross-pollination between your portfolio, all of that.
Right. All of that, and I wouldn't jump over the fence and be a fractional leader for someone, but
Yeah.
we do get really hands-on with project work, and I
Okay.
can share specific examples, as we go through here. And that can feel like it's more of a consulting
Yeah.
gig than a fractional thing,
Yeah.
but we'll see that all the way through to execution to make sure, we really land any project work that we do. And so that can feel a little fractionally.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that surprises these founders who put it on their shoulders and did it themselves and didn't ask for help and, figured it out. And, bootstrap founders don't overpay for help, along the
Right.
way.
Right.
And they're smart and they figure things out and so forth. But when you show up, I guess probably even before a partnership deal is closed, they're probably a little surprised that you're there so intensively looking at everything. Do they know how to deal with somebody like you yet?
It's funny, I haven't I don't know that I can remember meeting any resistance per
Mhm.
se, but part of that is in the approach
Good.
and just the bedside manner. I mean, you develop such a strong empathy for, what these founders are dealing with and what they're doing, and then as they're going through the fundraising process, if that's where I meet them for the first time,
Yeah.
just how onerous that can be. And
The due
so
diligence. You're part of due
yeah,
diligence, to be clear here, Phil, right? You're
yeah,
looking at their
exactly.
metrics going, "Okay, I see opportunity." Yeah.
Well, and that's the point though, is I'm looking for opportunity. I'm not
Yes.
looking to point out mistakes. I'm not looking to point out deficiencies. I'm looking, with really big eyes, frankly, Greg.
Yeah.
I'm going, holy smokes, imagine what we could build here. This is going to be so exciting.
Yeah.
And I actually think again to the point earlier, I think that kind of brings more energy to the table than apprehension. And that's why
Ah,
we don't meet a lot of resistance because we are just going to hopefully unlock things that they've always dreamed of doing with their go-to-market team, but
yeah.
either haven't had the time or resources to do.
Right.
And so I think there's this quick symbiotic relationship that forms where, all they're feeling from us is like, "Oh, I cannot wait to get to work
Oh,
on
great.
this." Yeah.
Well, and by definition, they've done a lot of things really right.
Oh my
And,
gosh, yeah.
creatively and magically and standard playbooks and so forth, but they've built something. They're the prize, right? And it isn't overfunded and it's not perfect and so forth. But yeah, I'm sure you must look at respect for what they've done, out of the dirt to, build a $10 million Paul Van Meter and team at Pro Shop in near Seattle on the podcast. They ran a machine shop for 15 years and then made software to run their machine shop and then finally got out of the machine shop business and starting their selling their software. And it's ERP. You guys focus on ERP.
Right.
It is runs the whole darn business, and their customers love them. It's really quite amazing. And yes, they haven't been doing everything in the SaaS sales playbook to date, but it's quite magical what they've created, and I know it's grown substantially since then.
It's funny because well, so absolutely right, and by the way, I absolutely loved Paul's story on your episode with him, and it's funny how many other founders of ours have a similar story where they went and worked in a heavy duty truck repair shop for a year, quitting a corporate job to go
Yeah.
do this so they could really learn
Uh-huh.
it. We have a great company in the custom millwork space, an ERP
Mhm.
for custom millwork, and that founder, Mark Sanderson, owns still his custom millwork business, Wilkie Sanderson. It's beautiful. Like if you go to their website, it's just the most beautiful work. And when you have that much passion to me about an industry that you're willing to build a software to run it better, I think all of your customers start to feel that. And I know that came through in Paul's story
Yeah.
when he's talking about their NPS and he's
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
all the customer love that they're feeling. I think he bought the domain
Yeah.
loveyouerp.com
Uh-huh. Got the
on his, yeah.
T-shirts, the whole thing. Right. Yeah.
And just like, that cannot be faked. It can't
Yeah.
just be,
Yeah.
you can build software so quickly and easily now, but you cannot build that. And that takes time and energy and authenticity. And I think that's what our founders have. And we just love that.
Well, when you said go quit your job as a VP of finance and then go do
This is not
machine
investment advice,
yeah,
Craig.
diesel, machine shop. I'm thinking of my friend Jacob Findley in Phoenix,
Yes.
who,
Yes.
is sold his company, partially into to Mainsail years ago. So he literally did that, and I wanna give some things to founders here so they can see how you see things, a little bit of the lens here. When you're looking at potential companies you can invest in, I'm sure you take a look and, it gets further along in due diligence. You're having conversations, looking at
Absolutely.
data, digging in, kind of doing a reality check and assessment. Founders may be thinking, oh God, our stuff isn't perfect. It is kind of broken and we suck at this, but we're really good at this. To you, that must look like great. you
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
maybe there's some low hanging fruit, hopefully, and some opportunities. Is that how it feels to you on your side?
Nearly always. It's really funny. So we, of
Yeah.
course, we do due diligence and we look at go to market deeply. And like I said, we're not looking for deficiencies. We're looking for opportunities because that's what makes our investment case really exciting. And when I do my little write up, which I do, it's just this long list. In fact, I changed it. It used to be a SWOT analysis and it was so pointless because all of it was in the opportunities.
Yeah, opportunity, yeah.
And so I just cut
Okay,
out the rest of it and all I
yeah.
just have this long list and what I would also say to any founders listening to this is that the overlap of those opportunities and the themes that we see is very strong from one company to another.
Oh, great.
And it doesn't mean that, I'm gonna over rely on pattern recognition or anything like that, but it's just funny to me where, you get there and you've got the founder plus one good rep or the founder plus two
Yeah,
good
okay.
salespeople and that's what they've got, and they're getting a lot of inbound leads and word of mouth, and that just is the story so often. And then they're thinking, okay, that's good to 5 million. How am I going to get to 15 to 20 million? And I think that's where all of the opportunities start to lay themselves out.
Okay, so let's talk about that phase, right? Founder-led sales, in these
Yep,
verticals, so they're B2B, so it's probably price points 20,000, 50,000, some higher, some lower, that kind of thing, a
exactly.
year. So it requires a little sales effort, and it's non-trivial software that sticks and has implementation and so forth. So by the time you're talking to them, they have founder plus a few salespeople, and it's kind of working. They don't have a sales leader and five salespeople, or I don't know. I mean, let's say typically. I mean, let's talk about the general pattern and some of the exceptions. Is that 5 million a founder without a head of sales? And
Yeah,
uh,
that is.
okay, look at that. Yeah, I see that all the time, but I'm just
Yeah,
yeah.
it is. It's the most common, and like you said, there are exceptions. The most common thing we see is a founder and two salespeople, two account executives, and maybe one BDR, but they're not doing traditional outbound work. They're really qualifying inbound, or they're helping clean up
Mm.
close lost opportunities or something like that. And they're going to some industry events, and they're doing lots of word of mouth referral, maybe a little
Yeah.
digital, lead demand gen and that is the most common setup that we see.
Okay. Well, I'll just bring it up now. This is a very common thing in verticals,
Yeah.
especially verticals. And there's magic. It's non-trivial to get to 1 million in ARR from nothing. Then to get to 5 million, we're probably talking 1 or 2% of everybody who tries to get up to there. And there's magic in the founder, their passion for their industry and their superpowers and personalities, and turns into the DNA. This is the soul and the culture and the passion and the fanatic focus in their industry versus the traditional SaaS playbook, you know, SaaS business model. Is there a transition from kind of the magic tricks of the early soul of
Yeah.
the founder and mixing just enough of the whatever, let's say traditional playbook mechanics of scale without just prescribing, okay, just do this scale playbook and get over it?
Yeah. Gosh, prescribing a scale playbook makes me sweat nervously. That's just not a I wouldn't I would never that wouldn't be an approach. There is, and it's funny because I think people think of founder led to, whatever you would call it, scaled go to market
Mhm.
as an event, and it's not. It's this long and sometimes tricky and sometimes fraught process of change. There's a lot of
Sometimes.
change management. Yeah, every time. There's a lot of change management in there. And I think where it goes really well for us is when we never lose the founder CEO's passion, or whether they're still the CEO or they've taken on a different role in the business. We never lose their passion. We can still bring them into the right deals, the right partnerships. We still leverage them at events. We still, all the things that they're specifically good at, we do, while layering in underneath all of these other things that make businesses scalable. And there's just an infrastructure layer that typically these companies don't have. And I'm talking about the most boring stuff in the world, a clean CRM, a database with, clean contactable information for your prospects. Stuff that sounds funny to say in
Foundations.
2025. Yeah, but the foundations, they aren't typically built in that 0 to 5 million range. They just aren't. And
Yeah.
so you take every amazing thing the founder's doing, you keep doing it while you really work to build the foundational layer in, so that we can start to layer on more channels, we can start to layer on more people, we can test new strategies. It's really important in, when you're going to do profitable growth, to actually test what you're doing, test things. And you can't do that without the, actual foundation layer underneath.
Okay, right. So to start doing small tests, not like VC style tests, like here's $10
Right.
million, go, right?
Right.
You actually have to set up a framework that says, how are we going to know if it works, that we can
Yes.
improve it and double down? How are we going to improve it and double down to do it really efficiently?
Yeah, and to not have false negatives or false positives, which are just really common when, because, like you said, you're not going to go burn $10 million on a test in our world. And so it's really important to be able to, I'm not saying it has to be fully scienced on the first test, but, having enough invested in it so that you really are able to come back with a conclusion and then make incremental improvements and changes over time, which lead up to massive changes over the course of a partnership with us.
Awesome. Well, maybe we skip this here, or we skip this here. How did you learn these foundations? And how did you come to be the go-to-market nerd leader
Yeah.
in Mainsail?
It's funny, I'm learning, so it's not learned, it's
Mhm.
learning, and I think that's key. I am obsessed with this one quote from a book called The Leadership Challenge, which is leaders should be net importers of ideas.
Mm,
And so I just constantly try to be a net importer of new ideas, new concepts, new practices, new ways of viewing our funnels and go to
mm,
market and technology and, the AI potential for disruption, et cetera.
mm.
But really how it started for me was I was a very curious account executive back in the day. And then I was a manager of the team, and then I went to this software company in Boston called Log Me In,
Oh,
and
sure.
it had, for the time, I would argue, one of the most impressive revenue operations and sort of automated go-to-market practices that I had ever seen. And I'm gonna name drop here. A guy named Chris Parati was
Yeah.
running that group, and it was one of the most impressive things. And not only did I like Chris, but you could just tell that if you just sat quietly and listened to him, you were going to learn massive amounts of things. And so actually the way I ended up in the Mainsail portfolio is I was at Log Me In, just sort of having my mind blown every day on what was possible with sales when you really brought technology and data to the table to help,
Hmm.
you know, learn and refine. And I'm talking to Vinay Kashyap, one of our partners, and I'm sort of sharing just like this cool thing we were doing back, again, this is like 2013, so the technology is really funny to even think about what we were using
Yeah.
back then.
That was early
Um,
SaaS, let's call it.
early SaaS,
Mhm.
and I'm describing this to Vinay, and I can realize that like it just hadn't entered the portfolio yet.
Mhm.
And so soon after, he calls me and says, "Hey, would you come and work at one of our companies?" And so then I took everything I had learned and then made every mistake possible as a head of
Yeah.
sales for the first time. So Mainsail was patient with me while I,
Mhm.
continually tried things.
Yeah.
And so that's how it happened. It's just continuous iteration, constantly learning. That's the answer.
So you have kind of a sales background, but you're not just responsible for the sales function, B2B sales. You're helping your portfolio with go-to-market strategies and
Yeah.
tooling and all the rest of it, including marketing and
Yeah.
success and retention and, what else is involved in there?
So I have an amazing team at Mainsail, and collectively we're responsible for sales and marketing and customer experience and revenue operations and payments or fintech. And if you think about what that means, it's the act of effectively acquiring and then growing and retaining a customer through ancillary, through,
Woohoo!
all sorts of stuff. And we're really passionate about that. We have a separate pricing and packaging practice at Mainsail, which is very cross-functional with all those functions plus product and engineering,
That makes sense.
which is amazing. But for us specifically, we're going to think about go-to-market. We always think about it as a multidisciplinary practice. So you don't just think about the sales. You think about the ways that sales, marketing, and CX are all coming together.
The
And so when we
system,
do,
imagine that.
oh
Yeah,
gosh, and when we
let's
do work, it's always going to involve the system. So Jess is my amazing head of CX at Mainsail, and I could not tell you how often. I mean, she and I talk 10 times a day, where it's just like, I'm seeing this at this company. I actually think it's a sales problem, even though it's showing up in retention. And I'm like, yes, let's go figure this thing out. And it's that sort of the ability to have all these functional leaders here talking to each other constantly that I think really help.
Well, that's the beauty of the modern SaaS game, and one of the challenges. The old days, it was sales did sales, marketing did marketing, everybody just hit their own hammer and did
Yeah,
the thing. SaaS, you can see how if you sell the wrong customers, it shows up in retention and
right.
vice versa, messaging all the way to all the way through. It's very systematic. So probably when you help these companies, having a cross-functional view from the outside probably gives you the ability to see how all the pieces fit together and move through them a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah, I think so for sure, and spot things that are really working and then share those with the rest of the portfolio. And that's something we're constantly trying to do through various, Slack channels for different functional groups and calls and summits and all these
Yeah.
things that we're trying. So we just want them to be learning constantly too.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I mean, it's why I have my peer groups and why we have an annual Practical Founder Summit in person and so forth.
Yeah,
Because you could set up the spreadsheet, tell them the answer, but when they talk to three founders and say, "When I got to your spot, I didn't know I needed this, and I did this, and I got to the other side and it worked,"
yeah,
or "What's happening this week? We tried this and it worked," and you're facilitating that, I guess, that
yeah.
kind of cross pollination. Can you walk us through what a typical engagement looks like
Mhm.
with an operating team of experts like yourself for a founder? So founders growing up at 5 million, they do a growth equity investment with Mainsail. They met you in the due diligence and so forth. Now it's welcome to the family. How do things appear? You're not on the board per se. How does it work with the founder and how do you start working with them and what happens?
Yeah. Every company in our portfolio has what's called an operations team lead. So that is a single operations team member, typically a senior member of the team. So I'm that play that role for 6 of our companies. And it
Okay.
means that I go to every one of the board meetings.
Okay.
I spend lots of time with the executives. I developed from day one a close relationship with the CEO. And the idea there is that there should be nothing missed as an opportunity for us to partner together. And what can happen is because we are a big team,
Mhm.
the operations team at Mainsail, it can be hard sometimes for our founders who are very busy managing their own big
Gotcha.
teams to navigate our org. and say like,
Yeah.
oh, if I have this question, who's the right person? And so
Right.
we have this role to make sure that we're bringing all of our ideas and resources to the table without being overwhelming or anything
Yeah.
like that to the founder. And so that person is listening. They're talking to our deal teams, they're talking to the founder and their executive teams. And then there's this constant dialogue
Cross
behind the
functions,
scenes.
technology,
Yes,
operations, sales, marketing.
exactly.
Okay.
Right, so we're always on the hunt. So that's how, if you think about the founder, they've now partnered with Mainsail. Maybe they're working with me as their operations
Right.
team lead, and I'm going to catch up with that founder one-on-one most likely every other week for the first year and a half of our partnership at
Oh,
least,
great.
and then maybe the cadence changes to monthly or quarterly. And the idea there is that I'm going to be asking all the questions I can, continue to meet with the executive team, and then connecting them with the right people on the ops team to make sure that they're getting full value out of our group.
This podcast is brought to you by my friends at Fullscale. 2 years ago, I interviewed three-time software founder Matt Watson on this podcast about his successful practical founder journeys. Matt leveraged offshore software development talent in his last two SaaS companies to staff up quickly and grow efficiently. So for his fourth venture, Matt created Fullscale, one of the fastest growing software development companies in any region. Fullscale vets, employs, and supports over 300 professional software developers and testers in the Philippines who can augment and extend your core dev team. I know several practical SaaS founders who use Fullscale's dev talent to make progress on their products and do it efficiently. Visit fullscale.io to learn why their approach works so well for so many SaaS founders. Now back to our program. So it's kind of like a consulting lead as opposed to the board member who we invested. How's it
Right,
going? Right. The monthly,
right,
calls or whatever. So you're really not playing, I'm on the board. You need to do this. You're partnering, I guess,
right.
more with do you partner more with the founder CEO or with their leadership team? Do you kind of identify the
Right.
opportunities and go one or two levels down?
Yeah, so typically the latter,
Okay.
but typically that happens about 6 months to a year into the
Okay.
partnership when the team is built.
Oh,
And right
okay.
out of the gates, there probably
There's
is
no
not a
team.
there is no team yet. There probably isn't a VP of sales or something like that. And so you are working very closely with the founder CEO. I find it's really important, irrespective of who you work with on an ongoing basis, it's very important to have a close relationship with the CEO. That
Yeah.
needs to be, you need to be able to call them and have a direct conversation about something going on with the business without it becoming defensive in any way. And that's only happens if you've built trust and a good relationship over time.
That they understand that you're trying to help and,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
problems are opportunities, and
Exactly.
that's the game. This is just the whack-a-mole game, which they've always played the whack-a-mole game to get to 5 or 10 million, and now there's a new whack-a-mole game to get to 20 or 30 million. It doesn't stop, by the way, you know, all of that. That's really interesting. So what happens then? All right, we're identified some, opportunities or challenges in the tech stack for revenue operations. We're not getting the data we need for pipeline or funnel analysis or CAC or something like that. Does that kind of get a discussion of one of the big things here? And yes, let's do it. And then it's handed off to your team and their people, or how does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically like that. It's we identify a specific need, and you brought up tech stack, so I can share an example there. And actually, this is true of pro shops. I'll just use them very
Okay.
specifically. We identified a need to refine the ideal customer profile, the ICP of the business. Pro shop
Okay.
sells to these
Yeah.
precision machine shops. Some of them have very specific certifications so that they can actually work with, aircraft, or they can work with
Mhm.
defense, et cetera. And we wanted to refine the entire market so we really understood who was the perfect customer. And this is where you might say, okay, look, we are running a business here. We're still having that bootstrapper mindset, which means the team isn't like this huge team where we have all these different resources running around it. And so that's where Mainsail could be really valuable. And so we had two people on our team who specifically, or on my team, specifically partnered with the Pro Shop team. And now this is no longer the CEO running this. Now we're working with the VP of sales and the CFO, and you're grabbing all their data that they can provide, and then we'll do the analysis to help you figure out, okay, based on all of your customer segmentation, who is the ideal customer.
Right.
Once we all agree on that, we'll actually go and use specific tools to help them build their database of those customers so
Yeah.
that they have a full prospect database and hand it off to them.
Imagine that.
And then now they can go to market against that. And what I think, what I would want folks to take from this story is like, those are things that are either very expensive or very time consuming if you do them yourself. And instead you give us that responsibility, and instead of paying a consulting firm, or you're paying for some group to come in and do this for you, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it really quickly. Actually, there isn't like a 8-week engagement here. That was probably 3 to 4 weeks max, and you just get it done and you get the team back to work. And I think those are the kinds of engagements you see a lot with us.
So that's kind of a gift to the founder here. Are there other things that take, I mean, and getting them to say, we have an ICP, we're going to stop
Yeah,
selling to the
yeah,
rest of
yeah.
these guys? Okay, that's, the focus is the F word. We talk about that here
Yep.
a lot. But are there some things that you're prescribing, wrong leaders, different kind of changes that get a little bit more friction where we hear from founders, not every suggestion that comes from their growth equity, private equity is well taken, right?
Absolutely.
Well, what's an example of one that has a little bit more friction in it?
Well, so it's funny you say that, because the ICP conversation can create a lot of
Oh,
friction,
yeah.
because it can feel really scary to decide to stop addressing part of your market. When you're already a vertical software business, you feel contained
Yeah.
as it is. And so let's just use round numbers. Let's say you have 20,000 total units in your addressable market, and we're saying, hey, really only 12,000 of those make good customers. You're like, you just cut off 40% of the market.
Yeah,
That's
but you have 200 customers. Their goal is to get to 400.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
Yeah, and so those can create friction. The talent conversation can always create friction.
Mm.
And I have to say, I have a tremendous amount of empathy for the founders here, because they have folks on the team who have helped them get from 0 to
Oh,
5.
yeah.
And this is true for everybody, including myself. Like, some of us don't have the skill set for different stages of growth. I'm never going to be the CRO of $1 billion ARR business. That's not my stage. And so it can be really hard for them to, and it's not even about letting go and exiting the person from the business. It's really about, hey, you might want to hire now your professional sales leader or something to take
Mhm.
over, where you had this, friend of the family running that piece of the business. And there can be some friction there. I find, though, that we have so many of our founder CEOs who are still in the network. I mean, this just happened. We had a panel at our CEO Summit this week where three of our very successful founder CEOs who have since exited Mainsail came and talked about the lessons learned. And you hear that and you say, okay, they're putting a little pressure on me, but clearly there's some method to this. And so it's funny. It's friction. It's
They're
not.
not casual, recommenders here. Like, they have a vested interest, they have
Yeah,
experts with time and, data in
right.
the game. Yeah.
And it's a worthy perspective to at least consider. And so there's friction, but there isn't really tension. You get a little friction, you discuss, you debate, you might even spend a few weeks going back and forth on it, but it doesn't create this tension where I think then there's, you're in conflict or anything like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of alignment in growth equity when founders want to get to 30 million and they know they don't know everything and they know they need a senior leadership team and
Right.
foundational mechanics and all of that. You mentioned the leadership, let's say the VP of sales or
Yep.
the marketing leader, right? We used to call this Pony Express management. You hire people to get you to the one or two stops, and then you hire somebody else. Is when
Yep.
you're growing fast, right? The company can grow faster than people can grow up. But let's talk about that founder plus salespeople to a sales leader.
Yep.
What does that first move look like that isn't a CRO or a VP of sales or I don't know, like a lot of people get it wrong and everybody procrastinates it. And
They
what
they
what
do.
what's your I don't know. I don't want to say playbook, but like what happens there?
Yeah, so when we are officially partnered, actually, a head of sales is typically one of the first two
I
roles. You
see.
see a head of finance is really common as well.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the first two roles that we're going to hire, and it's really interesting. I have a very strong conviction on this specifically. I
Good.
am looking for a sales leader who will do 5 jobs a day, every single day of the entire partnership. And I came to these 5 from my own experience going through the
Okay.
portfolio, and
Can you
then
share the 5? All right.
yes, yes. And so the first thing I tell, and this is on every single interview I do, so anybody who's interviewed with me out there will be like, yeah, this guy's consistent. You have to be willing to sell the product. You're not coming in to be an armchair VP at $5 million of ARR. At 20 million, you're not. And when
You
you're in
own
growth
part of the quota.
Yeah, you own part of the quota. You're going to cover for a rep who's at a trade show. You're going to cover for a rep who's on maternity leave, whatever it takes.
Okay.
And I remember covering for one of my reps when he was on his honeymoon, and it was probably one of my most gratifying moments of
Yeah.
that entire year was getting him to quota that month while he was out of the office.
Yeah.
And I think about that. You have to be willing to sell. So if you come in just to strategize and move chess pieces around, it's just not the job for you.
Okay.
We're just it's not the bootstrappers mentality. It won't work with the CEO. You won't get close enough to the customer. The customers in these vertical end markets, you need to get close to them, learn them, understand them, speak to them. And so that's number one. Number two is you have to be willing to be a hands-on manager and developer of sales talent. Right. So once again, it's not this big company armchair VP. It's a person who's willing to listen to the call recordings, willing to do the coaching sessions, willing to, you know, have a heart to heart walk around the block, whether it's virtual
Hmm.
or in person with the rep who's struggling. And that is it's an interesting skill set because you have to really enjoy that hands-on work, which some folks have graduated out of in their career, and that's fine. It's just it's required here.
Yeah.
And by the way, because of the way we really think about our teams, you'll layer in management over time, but you almost never start with management below you. So you're almost always directly managing the reps anyway. And so I know I was for the first 2 years that I was in the
Hmm.
portfolio, I was directly managing account executives with a really great BDR manager. And then finally, at the roughly 2-year mark, I hired in a sales manager as well.
Hmm.
So number three is sales operations or revenue operations. We always want to have a great revenue operations person there, but it's typically one or two people
Yeah.
and they can't get to everything. And if you don't have this mindset of, hey, as a sales leader, I need to be fluent in the data, I need to know how to use the systems myself. I can go into Salesforce or HubSpot and pull my own reports. I can think about technology and I can think about integration and stuff like that in a meaningful way. It's just not going to work. You have to be your own resource there. That's three. Sales enablement is number four. We would love to bring a third party trainer in, but it's unlikely in our budget you're going to hire a full time, $150,000 a year sales enablement resource. And but you gotta continually train the team. And so we're looking for people who will take that, sales manager mindset and marry it to some of those skills that exist in sales enablement where you're roping in product, you're roping in marketing, you're really thinking about methodology, et cetera. And so that's number four. And number five is the strategic VP of sales, the person who can show up, present well in front of the board, really tell the story, own a miss when it happens,
Yeah.
use a win to springboard, more momentum into the next quarter. And so, it's a bit wordy, I
And
know, but
and do you
those are the
include in
five
that
roles.
do you include in that the ability for a sales leader to have conversations across product,
Yeah.
success, and everything?
Yeah.
The tactical leaders are generally downwardly focused and, make doing the execution, but part of that strategic is to be able to move other parts of the business to help sales work better.
Yeah. And so, it's funny, you hear those five and you might think, "Well, where does this person,
Unicorn. Yeah.
where's this person?" And it's not a unicorn. These people are all over the place. And, Paul mentioned his VP of sales as being transformative. I think he was saying he's one of the best leaders. That guy is exactly that profile.
Mm.
We have some really great sales leaders. I mean, I think we have one of the strongest collection of sales leaders I've experienced, and they're all willing to do these jobs. And it's just
Mm.
key to how we hire. It's key to how we screen candidates before we introduce them to a company. And it is what will make you successful here. And if you think about what I'm really saying, it's really back to a bootstrapper's mentality.
Mhm.
The CEO has been doing absolutely everything up and down the
Mhm.
business. I'm asking a sales leader to do everything up and down the go-to-market.
There you go. So in that situation, founder plus salespeople, you say, "We're gonna help you hire a head of sales." Are you defining the role, doing the recruiting, bringing in the right leaders, and helping them get started, or do you advise the CEO to get through that process?
So I mentioned this team earlier. We have a talent team at Mainsail led by Emily
Right.
Azevedo, one of our partners, and they do an amazing job. We do nearly all of our executive level searches through our own recruiting team. And what's really exciting about that is we're a 22-year-old
Yeah,
growth
people
equity
follow you
firm now.
around, I imagine. Yeah.
Not only that, introductions are our absolutely favorite thing, or repeat executives are one of our favorite things, but we have a massive network of talent, and we're able to draw on that in people we've met through prior searches. It's funny, I met Walt at ProShop 2 years before we introduced him to ProShop. 2 years. And we just kept the relationship going over 2 years. And, I kept looking for the right opportunity for him. Um, but I would say our talent team is going to lead it. I play the subject matter expert component. So I'm going to be
Okay.
the full screen, sort of the BS meter on, the stories I'm hearing and the data we're discussing and things like that. And then we take a subset of candidates and we introduce them. And what I know we're really proud of is that we are going to place executives faster than most search firms at obviously like, much lower cost because it's just the way it works with Mainsail. And so
Awesome.
yeah, we are very hands-on in helping, and we partner with the CEO though to define the spec. We partner with the CEO to customize a scorecard for the search. We don't just say, here, we're going to do a search, here's everything. We have this very thoughtful kickoff call and we get going on the process. We want to understand the culture first, who's going to work, who's not going to work, and all that. And so it's a very thoughtful, methodical process.
Well, thanks for sharing your top five there. It's very useful for founders to hear that it's not people, the armchair VP that they're looking for. And that's a scary thing when they show up and 90% of what needs to be done is not in the armchair.
Right.
You didn't mention vertical experience in your vertical focus companies. It's a very common question. Almost always that founder plus two salespeople have vertical experience, speak the language, have the relationships. Does that first head of sales have vertical experience?
Yeah, it's funny. I think of these two as actually slightly different topics. So I think what I was listing was the set of skills I'm looking for,
Okay.
and
There
now we're talking about the experience.
okay, there we
So
go. Yeah, thank
two
you.
things on the experience side. One, I really like to meet vertical software leaders, and there's a ton of them out there. And
Yeah.
so you're right. I want someone who knows and has experience going to market against a very specific ideal customer profile in a specific market, really understand. It doesn't have to be the same market. I actually think that is overrated personally as a
Okay.
skill or as a set of experiences, but they understand. And then it's really great if they can understand growth equity. But the second one is, gosh, the size of the company they're coming from can really matter. And I think where I've made mistakes is in hearing candidates from much bigger companies and really believing that they could sort of play down, so to speak. I don't mean that in any
Mhm.
sort of negative way, but they can come back down to 5 million after being at 150 million and they'd be fine. And I think what I learned is that there's such a lack of resources relative at 5 million that those folks really struggle. They're like, well, where is my like 10-person business intelligence team doing all this work for me? And I'm like, you and RevOps are the BI team. You just got to go do it. Hey, we'll help, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking on the experience side. I love vertical experience, irrespective of the industry, and I love scale experience that falls somewhere. I think anything sub 50 million, where they've had a good growth run up to and above 50, is great. But if you've only been 50 and above ever, that can create some challenges for us.
Right. I totally get it. So, does that mean that the ICP work has to come first to say, we're our go-to-market model is gonna be based on this. So the kinds of people we hire are ones who fit that profile of customer, may or may not be the same vertical.
Yeah, yes. So at least to a certain degree, I don't think you have to do the fully rigorous, complete ICP study. But you have to know, are you an SMB? Are you a mid-market? Are
I
you a
see.
true
Okay.
enterprise type of sale?
Mhm.
And you have to know that because the skill sets of those leaders are very different
Mhm.
and they're incredibly valuable, all of them. But even just how you forecast when you're an SMB, high velocity sales leader versus an enterprise, they're completely different methodologies. And so we are looking for people who also have that ACV or like deal
Okay,
size
right.
and
Sales
velocity
motion.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see there's a lot of different dimensions here that we're
Oh, yeah,
trying
it's a
to,
great
yeah.
puzzle. I love the puzzle,
Yeah.
just like you do. You call a head of sales. You're not saying sales director, sales VP. Head of sales is kind of agnostic, like everything over there, buddy, Is that how you frame it?
We most commonly hire a VP of sales.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think specifics matter in a podcast like this. So I'll just be specific. I say head of sales because the title is less meaningful to me versus what the person is responsible for and what skills they need and experience they need to bring to the table. And so if you are an amazing up and comer who's going to be a director, a senior director, and you can do all of these five things and you've got scale experience and great, great. If you're a VP, multi-time VP, or you're even a CRO, when you come in, that's great too. Doesn't change what I'm going to ask you to do.
Yeah, right.
And so I say head of sales because it's the person responsible for the
Yeah,
function.
right. Well, let's talk about one function over in the go-to-market machine. In these vertical, let's say mid-market-ish kind of approaches, marketing's important, right? Sales outbound can't solve it
Yep.
all
Yep.
at this price point. What's happening in marketing when you meet these new portfolio companies, and what kind of first steps do you see there?
Yeah. So, um, marketing's so critical to the growth of all of our businesses. What's happening in marketing? They've typically gotten pretty good at going to their industry events, and they're probably starting to test some digital channels. So, they're working with some paid ads or some paid social, and 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 maybe they've done, maybe they got a good content engine going, something like
Mhm.
that, because the founder typically is the one who first starts that, and they sort of
Yeah,
use the
right. Yeah,
founder
they're
and
the chief blogger and
all that.
speaker. Yeah.
And that tends to be, I said, head of sales and two reps. I would say you probably have a marketing manager or a director of marketing, and that's about all we encounter. Maybe a one-person team with a couple of agencies that they've partnered with
Mhm.
when we invest. That tends to
Yeah.
be roughly where the marketing scales. So, um, a head of marketing, and again, I'm using the head of term, a VP of marketing is a very common hire for us relatively early. And again, we want a person who can function at all levels in the business. We're going to ask them to do a lot of
You've
things.
got your same
And
5 over there, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah. And then that person is going to bring in, they're going to basically, the common evolution we see is they go from a one plus agency model to replacing specific agencies or outsourced groups with that specific person. So you're going to bring in demand gen, you're going to bring in product marketing, you might bring in content events, and then you're going to slowly move off of all of those agencies to people who are truly in-house. And all of those people, much like on the sales side, are going to become extremely close with the customer
Yeah.
and the industry
What?
and all that.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
great. Extremely close. Sounds great. There's a whole stack of stuff in here. Marketing metrics and sales metrics and sales compensation, and hiring salespeople, pricing and all that. Is that just part of, the continual flow of what you guys work on, or are there some things that are more important than others or more early than others?
Great question. Again, I talked about the foundational layer. So I think if I were really, all of it's important, but if I really stack ranking, I want them to just get good at capturing data throughout the customer journey as one of my top priorities, because we can do so much more testing, we can have so much better decision making.
Yes.
We can make better investments if we have the data. And so one of the first things we're going to do, and I know this is like the most unsexy, uninspiring thing to
Mm.
focus on, is just get that built. But everything else you said, the compensation plans, territories, lead routing, stages, all that stuff really matters too. And we love to be hands-on in
Mhm.
supporting there. And, it's funny, but I find that all to be sort of, that work happens in specific periods. And
Mm.
so, I'm going to look at a lot of comp plans in December and January. But
Okay.
they're typically locked right now, and so I'm really
Yeah.
not looking at comp plans right now. Maybe once in a while. I'm gonna look at a lot of sales territories in that same time frame. What I'm looking at more right now is like, hey, we've started to really ramp this outbound sales team, or we're really starting to see some payback on the new events that we decided to go to this year. Let's continue to think about iterating and optimizing that. And that's where, from the marketing side and the sales side, we're gonna jump in and help, um, and be
It's so
hands-on.
magical. It is part of the practical founder bootstrap revolution. There's a lot more going on with bootstrappers than ever. There's better data to see what's working and do more of that and see what's not working and stop that, right? As opposed to the, explosion mess of the VC funding, do everything all at once. And some of it might stick and you can't really tell. So I totally appreciate that. What are some of the common mistakes or challenges that founders when they, that engage with your operations team when they look back, they say, "Man, we should have done this," or,
Yeah.
what kind of things are you seeing out there that, your founders are sharing?
There are numbers. So the first I would say is just building a great team, and I know we've talked about this a few times,
Senior
but
leadership team where you're talking about? Yeah.
and the rest of it,
Okay.
finding the people who can really work within e- every one of our company goes through sort of a natural maturity curve over the
Mhm.
course of working with us. That is part of why you partner with us, and finding the right people who can really help bringing the company along on that
Yeah.
journey. And that doesn't have to be a senior leader. Those are the people
Yeah.
responsible, but you need to find the people who are customer facing who are comfortable with the change, and they're not going to push back or fight back. Or you don't want
Yeah.
to
There's
face
still a
all
lot
that
of change going
organizational
on.
and
Right. Yeah.
yeah, all that inertia that you're going to feel in the organization. You want people who are sort of be like, this is exciting, this is great, this is fun for me, and by the way, it helps me help our customers, more easily. So
Yeah.
you want to find that. So that's number one. I think number two, we've talked about ideal customer profile a lot, but that is so important. And then you have to take that work and you have to build a go-to-market engine that really speaks to that ideal customer profile, that meets them where they are, uses their language. It's we don't have a blanket approach to how we define go to market, because not any one of our end markets buys the
It
exact same
always
way.
depends. Right.
And so we want to learn a lot, and we want to do that through the ideal customer profile work. And then we want to work on building this great go to market engine over time that is ideal for that. That's sort of optimized for that. Perfecting pricing and packaging. I mean, I'm going to represent my good friend Brian Russell, who's our VP of pricing and packaging at Mainsail. He's always trying to instill this concept for our companies that pricing is not an event. You didn't just change prices. You are looking at a long-term pricing and packaging strategy where you're going to have multiple events along the way. And it's
Hmm.
very challenging sometimes for these founders who really love their end markets to think about charging
Hmm.
more. And we're
Yeah.
we're, we're saying, hey, you're spending 40% of
See that a
revenue on
lot.
R&D. The product gets better every single month. At some point, you have to recognize value for that. Or the market changes, your competitors
Yeah.
change their pricing, things happen, and then you can repackage. And so that's one that I find is a very common challenge. And then maybe the last one I'll list, so I'm not just going on and on here, is we are in a obvious inflection point with artificial intelligence, with
Hmm.
AI, and so we are really helping our companies and all the founders we talk to manage that change, whether that's bringing AI tools to their development teams to make them more
Yeah.
efficient, whether it's bringing product specifically to their customers that include some AI features or are AI native, or it's bringing AI tools to their different functional teams,
Yeah.
CX,
Yeah.
sales, marketing, to make them more effective and
Hmm.
efficient. And so that is such a common topic for us right now because the potential efficiencies are real and the opportunity is real. And so it's very important to
And it's
address
going to be
that.
exciting for an efficient growth equity investor, right? An operations nerd that you can do more with less, I would say. Is that
So
it?
I'll share this. We have a great case from the portfolio, and we shared this at the summit this week. One of our companies has done a really great job adopting customer experience, our AI tools for their customer experience team across implementation, support, and CS. And on the support side specifically, they've grown their customer base something like 70% over the last year and a half without adding a single additional support rep.
Well,
And ticket volume has come down
yeah.
because of the deflection rate with the tools. And so when you think about what that means, just from how you can manage expense as you scale, and you start to think what that means for gross margin and EBITDA,
Yeah.
as a practical founder, as a growth equity person who really really focused on profitable growth, this is incredibly exciting right
Very nice. What other themes did you came up this week at your conference where you bring together founders and
now. Yes.
potential founders, right? People you're talking to.
Yeah.
What themes are top of mind with founders this week?
I'm biased on this one because this was the one that I was evangelizing
Okay, great.
specifically at the summit. But
Bring it.
um, I think most folks are starting to become familiar with Bolt or Lovable or Replit or
Yeah.
Cursor, these tools that are just sort of text to code type of products. And I think there's this idea that is real that it will become very easy to build vertical software over time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
And
just
everybody's going to be doing it.
and everyone's going to be doing it. I think the
Yeah.
idea is like, oh, I can build your tool in a weekend. And so you think about that, and you might stay up at night thinking this is an existential threat. There are lots of ways to protect yourself here. And
Mm.
the theme that we were discussing a lot, that I was evangelizing, is that this is when you need to own your ecosystem as a vertical SaaS founder,
Yes.
specifically finding all of the partners that could be out there in your ecosystem. And then you have to prioritize. You can't partner with everyone. It doesn't even make sense to partner with everyone. Find the ones that really enhance your product moat
Hmm.
and your just like your ecosystem moat that no AI tool can replicate because they're coming in fresh. They've got no brand presence, no reputation, no customer base. Sure, they were built quickly, and sure, they can probably charge less because of the model, but if all they're going to do is win on price, and you've got this amazing product with all these years of referenceable customers, and now you also have the ecosystem moat, we feel that that could be potentially the best protection from the AI threat in these markets. And so we talked a lot about that because we talked a lot about AI generally, as this theme, and then we talked about that. That was one that, and of course, talent is also always a major theme for us.
Still hard, still
Yeah,
always hard.
always, and always very important.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I was as you were talking about AI and the threat of faster, cheaper AI startup coming into your vertical space that you so diligently built up
Right.
is a little what these guys did to their previous competitors. It wasn't always just we
Right.
now didn't have a solution for this. There was the on-premise software that these cloud players, did better and so forth. So I totally get it. Well, I appreciate all of those insights, and sure you're learning new and cool stuff every week. I'm sure it was fun in Phoenix this week with your partners in Scottsdale and your founders. I ask every founder and expert who comes on the podcast here, what final advice do you have for practical founders? Let's call it the vertical founders who are getting to 1 million, getting to 5 million, hearing about
Yeah.
growth equity and wondering, how far this could go and, you know, graduating from scrappy startup world to a more scalable business, that other phase. What advice do you give most often to founders that you can share with the
Uh,
audience here?
you know, seek out community is the best piece of advice I could give to anybody, including my peers in private equity, which is there is so much to learn from peer companies, from
Yeah.
other executives, and I think sometimes it can be very lonely to be the founder of a
Yeah.
vertical software, founder CEO of a vertical
Uh-huh.
software business, and you can probably find one or two really good advisors that give you great advice along the way, mentors, et cetera, people who maybe were angel investors, whatever. But the broader you make your network, and by the way, you don't keep everybody. You might talk to someone and say, okay, that was interesting, but I'm not sure that was great advice. Okay, on to the next. The more you can collect great ideas and great people and bigger community, I think the easier it becomes to not make the same mistakes that a lot of these businesses are making. And so I think that's my strongest piece of advice is be out there, and it's hard because they're busy, but make sure you
Make an
make
investment.
time. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'll make a plug for my own Practical Founders peer groups, right? And I'm an advisor, but every month we meet with 4 different groups of some vertical, some horizontal, 1 to 10 to $15 million ARR software companies, and we're doing that community game. What's your problem, and how can the group help to help you progress? And in fact, it's kind of like therapy and advisory that precedes growth equity. Like a lot of these guys are growing up to growth equity. One of our founders just took down a major growth equity round this last round, and so and he's still in the group,
Yeah.
because he
Love
likes
that.
the peers. So, really appreciate you sharing your insights here, Phil. And must be a lot of fun to do what you do and not have to answer for the quota number at the end of every quarter.
It is a dream job and a privilege without question, Greg. And
Awesome.
I'm
Thanks,
very
Phil.
lucky to
Appreciate
do
you
it.
being on the
Yeah.
Practical Founders podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching this week's interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly in-depth interviews with serious software founders who are building valuable software companies without big funding. You can check out my blog, all the podcast episodes, and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com, or message me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. See you next week.